welcome to Adam's Friday Flow. We've got this plan today for scheduling priorities is going to be the main topic. And as usual, the sort of conversation sort of wanders wherever we like, but that's loosely what I try to keep it on. So the plan goes, attendees, do your intro if you want to put any information in the chat so people can contact you. You could do that. That will also go to YouTube. I copy the chat and put it in YouTube, and I cut out things that I don't think are that helpful. But if you would like anything not that you put in chat not to go onto that, then you can also tell me, and I'll cut that out too. And also anything that happens during the show, I lightly edit things out before I put it on. So feel free to tell me any of that. So I give my little example first. So my name is Adam Sparks Brechtel, and I have in my second year of running a workflow organization. So I come into people's family businesses, their home business, their homes, their garages, and sort of make it so they flows well so they can do the things they enjoy. And that is then, Rob, would you be up for introducing yourself? And then Michael.
Sure. So I'm Rob Hill with VanDyk Mortgage. I do mortgage financing, home loans for 1 to 4 unit residential homes.
Great. And Michael?
I'm Michael McDonald. Hey, can we get to see in gallery view? Because I'd like to see who I'm talking to.
Yeah. Hey, so do you have the screen where you see someone's face right now?
Just tiny, teeny pieces, and it's on my computer.
So on that view, if you click, there's like this little stair step up in the corner of it.
Oh, okay. So I can see the one person talking. Okay, I could try that.
Oh, well, what you can do then is you can click on the next one so you can see, like if you go to the one that looks like the tallest stair step.
No. That only gives me little thumbnail views and then it has a slide.
Oh,
so the dominant part of the screen is the slide that you're sharing.
Here, let me stop the share then.
Bam. Yeah, thank you. It'll always do that, I think.
It's just sometimes I don't. It's nice to see something
when you're talking to someone,
but not after.
No, that's good.
Okay, thank you.
So I know Michael from 1 Million Cups.
Huh?
I know you from 1 Million Cups.
Yes. I'm Michael McDonald from 1 Million Cups. I just decided to tune in to see what you were doing.
Yeah. So Michael has cool ideas, and he's fun to talk to too. So
I'm a retired Sandy engineer.
Right.
So I'm not trying to do flow in business right now.
That's great. So you've got a pretty good flow going anyway. So you're a great person to have on. So scheduling priorities is the discussion topic. So this comes from me realizing in my life that like I've got all this going on, especially with COVID and the weird priorities that have shifted in the world, and like staying at home is important and keeping distance is important, and it just changes a lot of how business looks, but it really changed how my home activity worked, because I was already working from home, but it still changed things up because then my family wasn't able to go places, so they're still here with me. And I was already, because it's my first year of business, already trying to figure out, how to get things done. And the biggest thing that, and I've given you this advice before too, Rob, is to schedule your priorities to make sure you have that. And I actually got that from another podcast I listened to by Michael O'Donnell. I think that's the right name. Anyway, Solopreneur Hour. And that he's always saying that, schedule your priorities, don't prioritize your schedule. And so I was like, well, that's a good topic. We can talk about how to make sure our priorities are happening, because it's not easy, especially for someone like me. I've got ADHD. So this kind of stuff is like, one of the reasons I went into organizing is because I'm constantly trying to do it. So you got to name your priorities, which is like figuring out what they are. And then the repeating that is another difficult thing, because especially with my brain, I like to do novel things all the time. I'm always like, oh, what's new? What can I do different? And to just say, okay, these are my priorities. I'm going to this is what I want to have happen. And then like even saying them out loud sometimes. It's like for me, you know, one of my mantras right now is, you know, to have life to the fullest, I'm going to joyfully use my gifts to serve my family and enliven family business. So that's like my thing, like my priorities that I'm trying to do. And so I try to say that like, you know, 3 times a day. And another one is schedule them. So one of the schedules that I have, what used to be a calendar, I used to calendar and try to put things on there. But right now, I'm not scheduling it that way. I'm just kind of, I have a set of things that I want to get done. And so I write them down and I try and get them done in that order. And I try to put things that are higher on my priority first. And then as I get to the other ones, that's how I'm doing it. So that's how I'm scheduling things right now. So we can talk about how that works with everyone else. And we'll go to the other stuff later. So let me close this. Stop share. Cool. How are you guys scheduling your priorities?
Mine's in my calendar. I time blocked my whole week out at the very beginning of this pandemic, as at the beginning I kind of didn't have a whole lot going on. I was, you know, obviously working from home, and then it was just like a weird brief like 2-week period where I didn't have very much business, or at least the business I did have, it was like kind of just like running its course, you know, and I wasn't really too involved with it at that point, since I'm like the originator right at the beginning. But yeah, so I've done that thus far. My one struggle though is like the back burner tasks, and I know you and I had talked about it. And I don't know, if I tried to do what you do, where you're like, I'm doing my priorities because they're top of the list and everything, then I feel like this part of the list is what will then fall by the wayside. How do you manage those items? Like if you get towards the end of your day and you're like, well, I didn't have time for that. Like, what do you do with that one?
Oh, that's good. Michael, do you have a swing at that one?
Well, there's been a lot of things written about that. Maybe you've followed that, right? That
some. Well, I haven't gotten to a lot of reading I'd like to get to.
Well, that's I think that that's a problem. I mean, a simple answer would be to think about whether that thing that keeps falling off is actually a priority. Right? If it's still falling off, then it must not be a priority. And if it's falling off and you don't want it to be, there must be a bigger priority than you're giving it. So that would be the first thing to think about, right? Like, you know, I have a bunch of things that are like, yeah, I could get to that. And maybe not even having it on my list will be better for me, right? To not have that as like, oh, I have to do this. And then maybe it'll come back to me on its own way. But other people are like, there are some people who aggressively use that 80-20 rule, that 80% of what you, of your benefit is from 20% of your activities. And so if in business, they'll, and you might want to look that one up, but they'll aggressively go after keeping their to-do list only being on that 20% that gives them an 80% bonus. That could be good because it kind of, it's a forced attrition of the things that aren't giving you value. It can be bad in that sometimes the pennies add up. So that's kind of a take with a grain of salt. Well,
that's a great thing. Actually, I'm going to share my screen real quick because one of the things you mentioned did remind me of something I haven't read, but I heard about on a podcast. So I got like the points of it. So I'm just going to show it real quick. It's called Procrastinate on Purpose. And I've got to move to my share screen thing here. So Procrastinate on Purpose by Roy Vaden. So, and he basically talks about like how sometimes if you're procrastinating, because you said this earlier, Michael, if you're procrastinating or you're putting it off, maybe it's not that important. And so he says like sometimes you do it just so that you can either delegate it, or if you realize it's not that important, you can delegate it, or someone else will stand up to take care of it, you know, in your team, that sort of stuff. And I mean, it's not doesn't mean like, you know, not get to things, but let me throw this in the chat here, and stop to share. My chat's over here. Bam. Okay.
Phrase procrastinate on purpose makes me think of like you're just trying to play to your strengths of kind of what you're touching on. Like everything's a novel idea and you have to do that because it's something new and exciting. Like that. So you're just like, oh, I'm going to do that and really follow through with it. And so I guess like that also plays the same thing that Michael talked about of those things that like were side projects, if you will.
Yeah.
They're not that important, so don't worry about them.
Yeah, and that's so some things I've got to procrastinate on, and sometimes there's great things that come from that too. And it's like this mix of like, you know, which one it is. I haven't read this book. It's I'm glad you reminded me of it, Michael, because it's on my list. But that was a cool thing. Also the 80-20 rule, that's cool. So yeah, the other thing too is, and this idea is like everywhere in productivity stuff, but the one that I remember reading it from at first is in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Have you heard of that book? Probably.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, and so what he did in his research is Stephen Covey basically read up on, I don't know, hundreds of different influential people in the history, or maybe it was 100, and he kind of looked at patterns of what they did. Like Ignatius of Loyola was one of them. President Eisenhower was another. And one of the things that he got from these people, and the one I'm going to mention right now, particularly from Eisenhower, is called the Eisenhower Squares. But it's, let me pull up my drawing screen. Well, I wonder if I can just draw right here on the screen. Yeah, I like my drawing screen. What are you smiling for here? Well, little thing. I get all the fun activities here. Breakout rooms, use caption, chat.
I know when you were sharing your screen, I had the ability to like make annotations is what it said. I've never used that feature though.
Yeah.
I don't know if like you have to share your screen and then do it.
Yeah, I think I do. But I don't want to, I like so there's a gallery view. Screen share. And where are we at? Desktop, a whiteboard. So I could do the whiteboard here. Yeah. Okay. So that puts everybody off to the side. Is there a way to change the view on your side so you can still like, you can see, huh?
So when you share your screen, if I click up at the top for view options, I can hit side-by-side mode. That pushes everyone to the side, or like if I uncheck it, or if I like exit full screen mode, there's options on our end, if for us to see what we want to see.
So can you like Michael, if you want to see faces right now, do you see a button where you can switch that?
Yeah. I mean, so if I have it, if you have screen sharing, if screen sharing is not on, your face is about this big.
Yeah.
On my screen.
If
that. Screen sharing is on, your face is about this big on my screen.
Oh, but is there a way to
like it? So the thing is I guess what I notice is that when the screen sharing goes on, the kind of discussion goes away, and it's kind of like, I'm going to run this thing.
Yeah, that whole thing.
And I'm I'm not so interested in that. But
no, I got you.
I hope you hold on. I'll show something that's great, but
I'll do this real quick here. So what is this? So the 4 squares. Have you seen this before, Mr. Rob?
I've seen this in like a Rich Dad Poor Dad cash flow quadrant.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other topic, I think.
Maybe that's the same thing, but maybe it's not. So there's things that are important, and then there are things that are urgent. And let me see how I pick that up and move it over here. So important, urgent. So down here is unimportant or It might be the other way too. No, this is the right way. Okay. So these things over here are unimportant. Can you see I'm going to put my spotlight on. I don't know if it changes anything, but things over here then are unimportant. And oh yeah, I have it flipped around the wrong way. It doesn't matter. And then things over here are urgent. So I'm going to see if I can select those and move that. Okay. Importance over here, urgence up here. So, and then there's these quadrants. So this is, this is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Very nice handwriting. Okay, so the idea is that in things that are urgent and important, it's easy to choose. Like, you know that you're going to do those things. And then over here in quadrant 4, things that are unimportant and not urgent, it's easy to let those go because you don't feel like they're necessary and they're not important. The ones that get confusing are these two here, number 3 and number 2. Because 3, if it's urgent, you know, you feel like you need to get done now because if it doesn't happen, it's going to go away, right? That's sometimes a sales tactic for things you don't want. The first one is hopefully the sales tactic people are using. It's actually urgent and it actually is important. But another one would be for scheduling things is this number 2. Yeah, non-urgent, like spending time with my wife, right? So she's pretty, you know, able to work with my the flexibility of me doing things on my own time and all this stuff. But after a while, that starts building up, and these number 2s become number 1s, right? They become urgent because you see, like, all right, she is really upset with me, and I'm not going to have a good day, or even worse, can happen in the relationship, right? If it isn't put in important. So the same thing is like with your business, is there's certain things that I could put off. Like for instance, this morning I've been putting off looking at my money account stuff, right? And I just found out this morning that my account that I thought been paying for my renewal of my license was coming out of a different account. So I got charged 30 extra bucks because I didn't have the right funds in that account. And you know, that's 30 bucks is annoying. It's not the worst, but still, if I had been looking at my money stuff the past few days, I might have been able to, you know, take care of that because it was not in, you know, it wasn't urgent, you know, because of all the automatic stuff that got set up with money. So that's an example. Whereas like what I could do, even though it's such a small thing, is I set aside a little bit of time during my day that I face that and I just look at that thing. So this is, if you're looking at your stuff, you're saying that you have all these things that are high priority. And so you put them in number 1, or they might be number 2, but you decided to put them in the schedule. So you've got to decide, like Michael was saying, is, well, you don't have to decide. You can just let the decision go away. But you can decide whether it's something that's, you know, in quadrant 2 or in quadrant 3. So is it something that you think is really important and it's just not that urgent right now? Or is it probably not important and you feel like it's urgent? Or maybe it's in quadrant 4. I don't know.
I think I might have to put that on a whiteboard here.
Yeah, scribble it down somewhere. They're called Eisenhower squares. Other people call them other things, but it comes from Eisenhower apparently. They don't know where it came from before him, so everyone attributes it to Eisenhower. Yeah.
It's unfortunate for the people before him.
Yeah. Whoever had that idea. Yeah. Yeah. So, how do you prioritize your schedule, Mr. McDonald?
Well, mine's not so hard to prioritize, mostly. You know, it's this might not be very useful, but the thing is that I want to fill my life with things that somehow like make it better, like make my life the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
And so I try to, especially now in this COVID time, when you can end up with a lot of emptiness.
Yeah.
Right. I try to have a variety of kind of things, and some of them I'm actually being more intentional about, just not because they need to get done, but because if I don't put them on my list, I will fill my life full of meaningless, not fulfilling things.
Right.
So it's kind of like that important and urgent thing.
Yeah.
But it's a little different. It's almost like creating a to-do list, not of things that have been pushed towards me, but of things that have come from me.
Yeah, that's cool. that's I like to think I try to do the same.
Huh?
I like to think that I do the same in a lot of ways, but like you pointed out, there's a difference. There's a lot of things that are pushed towards me that I also have to decide, like, is that really important,
Right.
or is it just urgent?
Right.
So I struggle with number two, the number two area a whole bunch, especially because of my brain, where I'm just constantly like wanting new things. And like you said, not all the new things or whatever it is that fills your day is wholesome or building of your, excitement in your life, or, fulfillment in your life. And even things sometimes that could feel fulfilling. And this is what Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who wrote the book Flow, he points out that even when you're in a state of flow, which is, when you feel like basically most alive, it doesn't mean that you're doing something good. It's just too bad, because it has nothing to do with morality. It just has to do with a sense of like, you're matching your skill with your challenge. And as I was talking with my wife and some kids the other day about how actually he even talked, because they were talking about torture, and and how they like, oh yeah, they thought it was so clever that they brought it up. And then I threw this in there and like, yeah, Mihaly mentions torture and how like there are people that got in major flow throughout history because that was, even like a bigger cultural thing, that was like a big part of their culture. That was something they did. So it was pointing out how, it's not really, it's really easy to get lost simply because something feels like it's good. And so planning that out is really cool.
Well, yeah. Going from working where a lot of, how you say, the important was fed to me, to retiring where the important had to be self-brought.
Yeah.
Kind of brought a lot of that into sharp focus.
Yeah.
Maybe it depends on where your age are. I mean, when you're kind of building, maybe it's best to be responding to those things being thrown at you when you're, but at some point, it would probably behoove you to sit down and start making that decision about like, well, besides the things that are being thrown at me,
right,
what's important to do.
Yeah. You actually have a really great story as far as you left because you said you wanted to go out feet, or you didn't want to go out feet first.
I didn't want to go. Yes, that's right.
Like many of your,
to go up standing up. Yes.
Yeah. Like many of your colleagues, you felt
right. Being pulled out on a gurney.
Yeah. So you made a conscious effort to retire early and do more with your life, which is really cool and inspirational. Also, I like you talk about. I think Eggs Benedict, but that's not the Mr. Benedict. What was the spy, early U.S. spy?
Yes, Benedict Arnold. It was the burnout issues.
Yeah, and that's a great example of making sure you have balancing your priorities instead of just dealing with things thrown at you. Would you tell us about that and how you heard about that?
So one of the things that I came across, like in my late 40s, could have been early 50s, was this talk a fellow gave. I worked at Sandia National Laboratories, which is, we do, all that secret stuff, national security. And so one of the concerns, a constant concern is to not have people become spies.
Yes, that's a bad thing.
Okay. So we had this one counterintelligence talk, and it wasn't the kind of talk that I'd ever thought of. And it was about burnout. And the burnout was, where does burnout come from? And a lot of what our public, our popular culture talks about is just, it's not quite right. So what he talked about was kind of like there's maybe a cognitive and physical things that drive to that. And what that is that you become addicted to working. And, because in fact, actually, that's the best thing in the world, is to become addicted to what you love. And that's where the flow is all about, is you become addicted to, when you work hard, when you solve a problem, you put on, when you concentrate and work, it fills your brain full of endorphins that are like a runner's high, and you feel really good. And that's a wonderful thing. And actually that's a reason to put, high flow, high important, things on your list. But one of the things that's like not talked about is that high even comes when you do things that you didn't sign, maybe you didn't sign up for, or you're not like feeling good about. And so let me think about that for a second. So like, the things that are assigned to you. And so then you take those on often as a negative. Oh, like my boss is making me work late to do this thing. And you become, and so then you kind of get a little hero mentality about it. Oh, I'm bringing home the bacon, or, oh, I'm, solving this important problem. But really, if you really dig yourself, you'll realize that a big part of it is, ooh, I'm getting an endorphin hit when I do this. And so you develop this really weird relationship with what you're doing, because on the one hand, you're addicted to this thing that you're complaining about. And then on the other hand, like you're complaining about it, making yourself, you're just not being balanced. And so then and the worst part about it is that you start doing, all of your life starts moving towards this thing, because you kind of push other people off to the side, other things like, my wife doesn't get priority. I'll spend time with my wife when my brain is completely broken and I'm exhausted. And so slowly, all these people, you're not getting any flow from anything that gives you joy. Yeah. And so then all of a sudden, these people on your peripheral start going, you're no fun to be with. All you do is complain about how you solve the world's problems, but not ours. And so then the crumbling is that your life starts to fall apart, in that you lose all these things that are actually important. And then the final straw comes in the inevitable, which is that work doesn't always work out. So all your eggs are in this basket of work, and all of a sudden, like coronavirus happens, and work didn't work out, or the political favors of your business happen, and you didn't get the promotion. Mm-hmm. And you become, and so that rug gets pulled out from under you, and it's your final rug, and you don't have anything to hold on to. And that's what he described as the burnout. And Benedict Arnold was a good example, in that he was a brilliant general who worked his ass off. And he wanted to lead the battles, and he wanted to do all these things. And at some point, all of he had lost his wife, he had lost his family, he had lost everything else that wasn't about being a general. And then they didn't give him like the leadership in some important Revolutionary War battles. And meanwhile, so then he turned to some woman who happened to be maybe a British collaborator or something. And, and she fed him.
Yeah, my wife.
Stuff, and he retaliated against his business which was a country, by becoming the most famous insider spy of American history, the most infamous insider trader of American history. So it was a burnout kind of problem. So that was crazy. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make your life be crashing, and then you just being a grumpy old man complaining about how life did all this to you when you did it to yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like in my life, I was like, when I heard him tell that story the first time, I was like, oh yeah, well, I like, it's a good moral anyway, but it was it was refortified the idea that, okay, you should definitely be having a balanced life and make sure that, because I'm a workaholic, you know, I get, there's so many cool things I can do with the job, and I can tweak, and I can, you know, make systems, and I love doing that kind of stuff. So I'm just like constantly doing that in my own business, and to the exclusion of saying, okay, I could do this all day and still not solve anything. Whereas I could do this chunk here, get a little bit further, and then go and actually enjoy my children, who are the reason that I started this, you know, entrepreneurial business, right? And so for a similar thing, it was really like, you know, it was really to my heart when he said that. I was like, oh yeah, that's something I need to do too, as far as like outside of business. So that's a priority thing. That it is funny because in that you're talking about this in that's what you've done. One of the reasons you've stopped working at a high pressure place, whereas both Rob and I are experiencing right now trying to make sure we do that with our lives, because we both have a high pressure. You said your first 2 weeks weren't so hot, but before I forget, I want to ask you about that bus behind you, because I called you up the other day.
Yeah.
Because I saw this. So tell us about that, Mr. Rob.
Well, I mean, so whenever you advertise, well, this bus in particular with Lamar, so, you know, we have 2 buses around town. One has this side with me on it, and the other has like some of the other loan officers that we have and our branch manager. So not like one bus, 2 sides, but, you know, 2 buses with just one side.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when we did that like a year or 2 ago, maybe, I think. Yeah, so it's just been kind of driving around town. I think we got a lot of hey, you're in a bus thing, like when we first put it out there. But I don't know, you're the first person in a long time who's been like, hey, I saw your face, dude.
That's funny. So that's been on there for a whole year. This is the first time I've seen it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, well, so some of these faces have kind of cycled through. Like this person's new. Some other people have been taken off, but you know, I've been tried and true on the bus since the beginning.
That's funny.
So they're updating the shrink wrap regularly as change over people?
Yeah, not as like frequently as like, okay, this person just signed on, now let's throw them on the bus. It's like kind of like a period of like every 6 months or so. Yeah, like
as opposed to under the bus. That's good.
Right, like so this person shouldn't be on there. She doesn't work for us anymore, right?
Aww.
So it doesn't quite, because it costs like what, I don't remember, like I think $20 a square foot, or I don't remember.
Yeah.
So
they just get like, you know, like when your mother thought you were gonna marry this one gal, and then like she's not actually part of the picture, but she really likes the rest of the picture, so just cuts that one out, and then she can stick her on the new gal or something like that, you know?
That's exactly how they do it.
My mom did that, had a long time ago, and she bushed out one of the ex-in-laws, and so one year I came to Christmas with a joke gift, which went over really well with some, but not as well with others, which was a leaf. It was like this really cool leaf, and it said, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you like to be? Right?
Yeah. Because
you might become a tree.
Oh my goodness. There you go. Wow. You know, an unrelated but unique thing about that is actually, especially in this time where we're talking about respiration, like, you know, how we're breathing and coughing and that sort of thing, it has a huge effect. You know, what, if you think about it, as we're breathing, we're kind of making trees. Because you think about a tree, what is it made of? It started out like, say, that's an acorn, or around here, these elm trees, these little seeds, right? That started this huge tree. Where did the rest of the tree come from? It didn't come from just that seed. It came from the air. carbon dioxide is what it transferred into that. Like people say it comes from the ground, but there's not a big hole under the thing. It's just taking the air from around it and making it into it. So we're doing it even as we're alive. We're becoming trees, sort of, if you consider your breath part of you. So.
Well, at any rate, you don't want to become a tree in a family photo. Then pay attention to the relationship.
That's great. What kind of tree do you want to be? Boom. Oh man.
That would be kind of the ultimate bad argument ender, huh?
Yeah.
So what kind of tree do you want to be?
Wow, especially if they knew the reference. Man.
Yeah, my mom had done it like twice, and.
Well, so it became a known factor in your family when she starts talking about trees. Yeah. So I've got a couple sharing things here that I'd like to bring up. Let's share. So this is which one is it? Okay, here we are. So this is the solopreneur. This is something I mentioned earlier. This guy is the one that talks about scheduled priorities, prioritize your schedule. And his big thing is he does a lot of YouTube channel stuff, talking about how, as a solopreneur, how you would make that happen. But he's just kind of fun to listen to too. But that's one of the things he keeps on coming back to because it changed his life. But Solopreneur Hour, I listen to it on Stitcher. But that's that. And did I put that in the chat? I know I put this other one on the chat. Which is, I talk about this guy a lot because it's kind of part of my name as a business, is the flow. So this is his face. This is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it takes a long time to figure out how to say that name, but Csikszentmihalyi. I haven't like YouTubed it like to figure out how to say it. Like, how do you say this name? So like there's these people from I want to say some Eastern Bloc country, and they just say his name real easy. I forget where he's from, but anyway, so he's really kind of fun to listen to and talk about. So just kind of think about how you're reaching your full potential during the day. So those are kind of fun. I just want to shout those out. Since I mentioned them, I'll stop the share. Okay. And I'll put the solopreneur. Nope, that's the wrong one. What have we got here? I don't have, oh yeah, the TED Talk on there. But he also has a book. And that's, and I listen to books because they are audiobooks. And that's just what I do. Because if I sit and try and read stuff, I do a really good job reading. Like I have high memory of what I read, but it takes me forever. So I just, it's kind of like the things I have to be careful about in my own business is that if I focus on something for too long, I hyper focus. And so I have to, if I have someone reading it to me in my ear, then I can tune in and tune out and like think about stuff, but I won't stop reading the book, you know? And it gets done. So, you know, I've been able to be exposed to a lot of things because I do that, especially like if I'm biking, which, you know, that's not exactly the safest. That when you're biking, you're actually listening to something else. But
there's one in, one out, right?
Yeah, totally. I don't have this. I have more.
Right.
I have just a little earbud thingy I put in one ear, but even so. Anyway, that's how I get to a bunch of stuff. So Solopreneur is an audio thing, so I listen to that, and I also listen to Flow because it was like on like that. So the do you guys have any books that you recommend? Is there any books out there that you've found are really really great? And they don't have to be about figuring out your lifestyle.
I was gonna say, within the similar vein, Atomic Habits. That's my newest one that I've burned through and got to re-listen to.
By Paul or
what's his name? James Clear.
James Clear. Okay.
I'm more prone to doing things on Audible, but
Yeah, I got an Audible account too. So
yeah,
James Clear,
that guy.
James. Out of Atomic Habits. Oh yeah, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good one.
So cool. So what do you like about this one?
Well, it's funny because like when I think of atomic, I think of like, an atomic bomb, which is like, this is a big change of a big habit that you're going to be trying to get your good habits in line. But no, the reference is more so like the atomic level.
I'm
Just
glad you
like
mentioned that.
micro changes to build up good habits in a long term sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's kind of cool. I want to check that book out. But you get to say that's an Audible. Well, I'll use my Audible points for that. So Audible, I'm going to put that on here too, audible.com. On a kind of connected idea, but not really, may not be the same thing, is when you talk about atomic, the funny thing is because the atomic bomb is based off of something happening at the atomic level, going, hitting critical activity. It's like going and going and going. But the fact that it has to start with something small. The things with priorities is that you focus on some key aspects, and this is from a book of Power of Habit, where he says keystone habits. So you figure out what the keystone habit is, or the thing that really, the major thing. So this one guy, he started as a CEO for the company that really revolutionized aluminum manufacturing. The company's name, I can't remember it, but he revolutionized it. But the way he did it at first really turned people off. They're like, this is crazy. This CEO is going to tank our stock. And so they like took a bunch of their stock out, and later on found out that like they shouldn't have done that, because it like was 20 times more important 5 years later. So what he did is he came in, and he had a similar story to you, Michael, is that he was kind of done with working. He didn't want to do anything else. And the only reason that he took up the CEO is because he kind of thought about it, and he worked with other people. He says he really wanted to make a difference in the world. That's what he wanted to do. And so what he decided to do was to focus on safety. So metal gets really hot in order to work with it, especially aluminum. And so when he's at these plants, there's all these accidents and machinery and stuff. So he put safety as the major, his major platform. And so he gets up there for his initial talk to all the stakeholders, and he says, we are going to make this place the safest ever. We're not going to have an accident for the whole year. We're going to reach that goal. And like, these people are like, come on, talk about bottom line. What are we talking? What's going on here? And for him, that was his bottom line. And so the craziest thing that happened is because he focused on this one aspect, he made it so everybody else switched their culture so they communicated better, which made the place safer, but safer is also more efficient. So it made the place create things better. It had more buy-in by everybody, employees down and up. So there's big communication happening, making the system work better. And, they just became really productive. I got to look this up now. The Power of Habits. So have you heard of that, Michael?
Something like it, but because like a couple of years ago, one of the vice presidents at Sandia Labs was Sid Gutierrez, who was a former astronaut. And Sandia had gone through some major safety problems. I'm going to stand up for a minute.
Yeah.
So we had like some big safety incidents. And he gave a talk in where he wanted to create a safety culture. And I don't know if he got very far, but his talk was super compelling, because he kind of said it was a similar kind of idea that building a culture around safety in our particular context was really, it wasn't just like we had been taught that safety was, or, our culture was that safety was a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And the accidents and stuff were, from not doing enough of this necessary evil.
Huh.
Okay. And he was like, he would talk about these particular NASA days, the Space Agency, and about how they had an accident and went through a culture of safety, and how kind of fun and interesting and fulfilling it was to sit and think about and to do your job that way.
Yeah.
And it was really inspiring. I found it really inspiring. I started thinking about like the accidents that we had brought us there. And there was one that was that this explosive had gone off, and somebody had a near miss on detonating some explosive in a test facility, like a real near miss. And so it shut down the facility, and I was like, and it was basically they had a detonator go bad, and then they walked out into the room where the detonator and the explosive was, and they pulled the detonator off the explosive. And when about the time that and very shortly after they got them apart, the detonator went off, so the explosive was not connected. But if the detonator had gone off 10 seconds earlier, they would have been killed.
Bam.
So the thing that made me interested was like, if instead of it being like, oh, we're going to deal with the safety, if they had been safety first, maybe they would have been doing routine exercises using the robotics group down the road, to do well, what do you do if there's an explosive detonator on an explosive, that kind of thing. And people could have had these really interesting, fun jobs that would have developed this lab facility into something really fun and cool.
Yeah.
And safe.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
I thought it was insightful to change that. I don't know that what is your job, Rob?
I'm a mortgage guy, so
okay.
Trying to buy a house or refinance.
So maybe safety isn't your thing, but
no.
If you can imagine that you could reconstruct something like that around an issue that was really an awful issue, and you turn it into an opportunity. I think that's what you're saying, Adam, right? For example, if the worst thing is, I don't know, what is the worst thing in home loans?
Somebody either not closing, for any particular reason, and you're halfway through or even almost done with a process about to close, and a purchase in particular, you got sellers, they're looking to move out their home and stuff like that, or maybe they need the money for something very important. There's a lot of moving parts outside of just our little bubble. There's a lot of moving parts, obviously, and a lot of people involved, but that's what I try and think of as the bigger picture of all the other lives that get affected by just one transaction. A lot of cases, just one of maybe a few transactions that this one person has in their entire life is buying a home or just selling and then buying, kind of thing. But I also think of it too, as far as safety goes, because I used to be an aircraft maintainer on the Osprey before this, and a few reasons of why I got out of it was because there was a lot of pressure, just whatever you touch on the aircraft has I think 7-year, if something goes wrong within 7 years, you're still liable for it, kind of thing. So yeah, it's very much safety driven, or it could be more so safety driven in that aspect, because I think there was a lot of similarities there, where it's safety was a necessary evil, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But in a desk jockey job, though, I think now is a great example of how we can be more safe, right? In this sort of very safe environment.
Oh yeah.
Not just we're social distancing, but more so the hours that you're working. I've heard stories of articles, hypotheticals of, hey, I could be a lot more efficient in my job if I worked less hours, sort of thing. Kind of stemming from the original why we even have a 5-day work week and not working 7 days out of the week, kind of thing. That could be, with our technology now, that could be driven down even more and being more efficient, and probably paying less to employees that don't necessarily need to be paid as much, that sort of thing. Or just pay them more,
So
and maybe they'll be a little more productive, and
they don't have to use that time as extra time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because like, yeah, you're working an 8-hour workday. How much actual efficient work are you
And
doing?
they won't become a Benedict Arnold.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's
So that's what I think about. Like, that's the bigger picture that I think about of how we can be more safe in this environment. And like, if it is something as crucial as me hitting a button just to send a nuke off somewhere, well, maybe if I work less hours, I won't fall asleep at the job and accidentally hit a button, right? Like, it can boil down to something like that as well.
Well, if you think about what you said about that impacts, one of the reasons that I don't buy new houses very often is that buying a house, that process is just stressful and not fun.
Yeah.
Which is good because I kind of settle down and I'm all happy. But I'm just like, I finish buying a house and it's like, would you like to give another kidney? Oh, yeah, I want to give another kidney. Well, let's see if this one grows back first.
Oh, that whole thing.
But if you so there's a lot of aversion issues that go on, and creating a bad loan. If I was like selling my house and, adding to that turmoil basically pulls me out of the market that much longer. But the people that have a good experience probably are more likely to go, oh, okay, that was cool. I loved moving up a house, so I love doing that,
Yeah. Or you can think of it as a necessary evil, like maybe not you in your lifetime right now, but someone who had a bad experience is like, I'd rather give a kidney. But yeah, maybe they have to downsize at some point and they have to do that necessary evil at some point later in their life.
What I'm saying is that as a business, it's not good to have customers leaving.
Oh yeah.
With that bad a taste in their mouth.
For sure. Yeah.
And then right now, the safety thing is an important deal because like if I was in a position where I thought that I should sell a house, I'd be like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do this. Do I want to go in and risk my life to sell this house? Do I want to go deal with movers? All these things that would be like, oh, I don't want to go through all of that, force myself through all that at this time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So if a company makes it safe, if it's obvious that no, this is going to be a super safe process. We're going to do Zoom, we're going to do this, we're going to do,
use gloves when we go through the place, masks.
Well, yeah, right.
Because like part of my job, I still have to show up on the location, like in order to do most of what I do in some cases, unless it's more of a coaching sort of scenario. But and so like that, those are definitely things we want to, like doing the necessary evil of, put on the gloves, put on the mask. And there was a discussion like that at 1 Million Cups afterwards when we did those breakout groups. They were actually talking about homes and those sort of dangers of like, because I don't understand the whole process, but one of the guys was a photographer for homes, and Jason Collins, and he was talking about how something got stuck because of COVID stuff in there. It was sort of political too. It was kind of interesting. Michael, I'm going to have to wrap up here in a moment.
I got my 10 o'clock meeting.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, Rob. And I look forward to talking to you later too. And Michael, real quick, I'll finish with you, and then I got a question for you, Rob, you don't really have time. So I'm going to do with you first, Rob. So these things that are getting pushed towards the end of your day, do you have any new insights on how to handle that? Like, do you have an action you can do after this?
Well, part of my time blocking is like the very big first hour of my day and the very last hour of my 8-hour work day, if you will, is supposed to be like, last hour is to, okay, like what tasks can I not finish right now and I have to go home, right? Make sure they get annotated. And then the first hour of the next day is to do those tasks. So that's something I've tried to do to combat it, but it's kind of like within your slides you just had at the beginning was you got to do it, right? Just repeat it and doing it. So that's the step that I'm on working.
Especially because you said the first 2 weeks were not much, but now you're just doing a whole bunch of consolidating.
And it's going to get much tighter as Zoe goes back to work here in the next next week, I guess. My schedule is going to be a lot less flexible for that reason. So my deadline to be home is going to be a lot more tight, and leaning on my processor to help me out with that and being like, hey, I need you to do this because I can't,
Well, thank you, Rob. And I hope to hear more about them. That works out well. And if you need to go to catch your meeting,
Zoom.
Yeah, I'll see ya. And Michael, who was this? Oh, yeah, and you can see him. Michael, who was this guy that told you about the necessary evil? Because I was quoting it here as from Michael's coworker, from your boss, from
which one? Which this is
the
safety issue?
Yeah.
Oh, that was the guy. He was talking about safety, really, and building a change of culture around safety, and that was Sid Gutierrez. He's let's see if I can find him quick.
While you're looking that up, I'm going to wrap up a few things from my just to kind of keep the rhythm of how this thing goes for those that get to watch it later, if they do. It's okay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Oh, here's Charles Duhigg, the habit stuff. All right, so there is something I'm going to go to later today too, is Activate New Mexico. And I have the links for this. So I'll put all this in the chat. And so Activate New Mexico is doing this thing every day, or every Friday, where they talk about some sort of thing for your business. And today is going to be about customer development. And so I'm going to do that today. That's kind of exciting. But then later on, there's this kick-ass entrepreneurs group that presents. And I'm trying to find the chat because when I say shared the screen, everything. There we go. All right, so those are all those links. But Activate New Mexico is going to happen in just a little bit here. They may have ended sales already. They're pretty quick about cutting off the sales. When I say sales, it's for free. But on Eventbrite, it's something. Kick-Ass Entrepreneurs of Santa Fe is on Meetup, and they tell stories about how their businesses grow. And you might have heard Eric talking about this at 1 Million Cups. And then 1 Million Cups is on Wednesdays, every morning at 9. And of course, you can always come back here and join us. So thank you for coming and hanging out with me, Michael. It was great to talk with you and Rob today. And I look forward to seeing you around the spots, like at 1 Million Cups and stuff too. And if you know anyone else who wants to come and chit-chat it up with us, I encourage you to bring him over. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Keep the sparks flowing.